So let me thank you. Please give it up to Bob just for your leadership. I know you're very committed, and then let me thank everyone affiliated, the staff, and then all of the friends and supporters of Children at Risk. Let me just thank you for what you do, because I tell you, it is not an easy task. And then oftentimes we do a lot of things. The question is, to what degree can we be transformative in what we do, so that you can do a lot of good things, and can be incrementalist in your approach, and you do a lot of good things, but people can't see the things that you're doing. But I think we always try to focus on being transformational in our approach, that people can see and realize the positive impact. And that's my focus. So I want to thank everyone. When I came into office, I said I didn't want to be the mayor of two cities in one, cities of have and have-nots. I didn't want that to take place. And then I appointed this task force to focus on equity. It was the mayor's task force on equity. And they did a yeoman's job, and they came out, they released a report, Rising Together, a roadmap to confront inequality in Houston. And it was a very detailed report. And Houston is experiencing many challenges, as you very well know. Too many Houstonians, especially children, live in poverty, still way too many. In the shadows of all of our big buildings and communities that are doing very well, there are still communities that are underserved and under-resourced. And one of the things when I came into office, the question was, okay, how do we change things? And when you're dealing with limited resources, I think that in large part the approach that we've taken in the past is you just try to take those limited resources and spread them all out the city as best you can. So you just, you take $1, you divide it up, and then you give each one of those districts the same amount. The reality is that you don't make much headway when you do that. And government itself, the city itself, the government structure, the municipality is not going to be able to change things. And so the focus was how do we devise, make neighborhoods that are not seen as opportunity areas, neighborhoods of opportunity. And let me just share with you why it really came to pass. Because when I came into office, there was a housing project that was on my desk, building a housing project, and I was thinking it was going to be built in the Gallery area. And it was generating a lot of consternation, And so I looked at it, and I looked at the financial cost of it. It was building 231 units, was costing them about $56 million, and about 10% of those units were going to be for people who were at the poverty level. And I just looked at it. Developers' cost of about $6 million, developer's fee. And so I looked at it on financial reasons. I said no. And quite frankly, I can do a lot more in addressing people in low-income, that low-income category by doing some other things. And got into a battle with HUD on it and others. And there was even housing advocates that were pushing me to build over in that area. And their argument was that building in low-income housing or this multifamily development in low-income community was not going to help the people that were there because they couldn't partake in the American dream. And to be honest with you, that just struck a nerve with me, because the argument is that for these families to partake of the American dream, Mayor, you need to build over there. Well, in order to really appreciate what was bothering me, you also have to understand where I come from. I am a product of Acres Home, as we say, the fofo. I was born and reared and still live in Acres Home, low-income community, okay? Neither one of my parents graduated from high school. Y'all know I'm starting, I don't have to repeat that. but dad who died early and a single mom that reared 9 kids in Acres Home. And even after I went to law school and came back, worked at a major law firm, and built a house in the same area. My mom refused to leave from 3005 Stallings. Absolutely not. In fact, my mom died when she was 91, December 27th of 2014. And during that time before she passed, my mom only came to my house 5 times. And 2 of the 5 times, true story, 2 of the 5 times, she wouldn't even get out the car. Stayed in the driveway. And on the special days, she would not come to her kids' home. The rule was, on all of the special days, Mother's Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all of those special days, we had to return to 3005 Stallings. And you had to bring her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, you had to come back to 3005. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, relatively small kitchen. But she would not leave. And the reason why she made it a rule for us to come back, all of her kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, is because for her, she said, I want all of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know where you started. And it was to her to serve as a reminder that you can grow up in this household and you can still achieve. And she made me commit that I would never, never participate in selling her home and all of her children. She said, this home will always be here. Okay, so I grew up in Acres Home, reared in Acres Home. I still live in Acres Home, and I'm the mayor of the 4th largest city in the United States. So when I'm looking at this project and people are telling me, Mayor, in order for these kids to partake in the American dream, you need to build over there. And that goes contrary to my own life. It doesn't compute with me, okay? And you can't build enough over there to move everybody out of these low-income neighborhoods to go over there. Well, the problem has been, in my estimation, is that we have not invested in those communities to make every community a community of opportunity. So that if you're living in Denver Harbor, it's a community of opportunity. If you're living in Sunnyside, it's a neighborhood of opportunity. If you're in 5th Ward, as we say, the Nickel, it's a neighborhood of opportunity. Regardless of where you live, if we make the proper investment, no matter where you go in our city, you ought to see promise and opportunity and hope and inspiration, okay? It's not about ignoring communities, and it's not about changing the culture or the history or the personality. You want to hold on to that. But just because the culture may be different, the history may be different, doesn't mean that they shouldn't be communities and neighborhoods of opportunity. So the concept was build complete communities. And then a developer came in and was sitting in, and Bob was saying to me, and this developer said, Mayor, if the city signals that the city is going to be focusing on certain neighborhoods, such that no one business enterprise feels as though they're having to go into these neighborhoods by themselves, but others will be coming as well, then the risk is shared by all. But you got to signal, this is where the city is going to focus. But you can't say the whole city. And so then I had to say to my city council members, we're going to pick 5 communities at a time and concentrate our efforts. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to be spending any resources in the other neighborhoods. We're simply going to concentrate our efforts on these 5, and we're going to work with outside partners to find the additional resources to get us where we need to be. And so, what's a complete community? Well, in every neighborhood, schools are important. You got to have quality neighborhood schools. Who wants to live in an area? Who wants to attend a school if the schools are failing? So you have to invest. So quality neighborhood schools. And one way of getting quality neighborhood schools is that you have to have people living in the areas. Not just affordable housing, but mixed income housing. Okay? And so I've gone around even telling people who live in the lands, and some of you are like, who the hell are you talking about the lands? You know, the pear lands, the sugar lands, the woodlands, you know. I'm going around saying to them, you know, it's time to come on back to the city. And especially children of families that grew up in many of these neighborhoods who have gone elsewhere. But what some of them have said to me, Mayor, we'll come there, but we just can't find the housing product that we're looking for or that's within our price points. And so we're working on that. Because you have to have many of these kids who have not grown up, they've gotten educated, they've gone to college. If they come back and they're living in these neighborhoods, then they can help to navigate through the educational system and assist parents who may not be as educated, but they love their kids, but they're having to do 2 and 3 jobs, so they can't be there as much. Because when I grew up, even in Acres Home, the business people were living right there in my neighborhood, Garden City. Even the principals and the teachers right there in the neighborhood. Okay, so we were all there together. That's one of the reasons why I still stay in Acres Home. Because, you know, Freddie Jennings, who was my 8th grade biology teacher, for example, right there in the neighborhood, and he became my biggest cheerleader. Okay, and Ms. Hall, my 2nd grade teacher, was right there in the neighborhood. She was the one who got me reading. Okay, because she was the one who was standing in the doorway of her class every morning, and every time we come in, you know, she would hug all of her kids. I hated it. But let me just say, outwardly, I acted like I hated it. Inwardly, I loved it. And the one time she didn't do it, I got mad. But that's the way kids are. Outwardly, they act like they don't. They do. But these were people, and George Smith, the pipe owner of the business, these were people that lived in the neighborhood, along with those who were not as educated, and they helped to navigate, they helped to advocate for additional things at the local neighborhood schools. And we need mixed income housing to have that diversity of even educational levels in these neighborhoods to help demand, advocate for things from these schools. You got to have that. Otherwise, you have parents who are working 2 and 3 jobs, and they're just not going to be able to be there as much. Okay, so you got to have that. And if you want to end the food deserts, you got to have the rooftops, mixed income housing. Kind of hard to get the Krogers and the HEBs and all of them into some of these neighborhoods if they see that you one level social economic strata. So you got to bring them all in. And at the same time, like I say to these quality grocery stores, come on now, you got to come and help us too. Okay, you got to help us too. And then to financial institutions. Well, I've said I met with 29 banks, their CEOs and executives. And when I said to them, you have this community reinvestment dollars, you have to spend it. I'm not saying that you're not doing a lot of good stuff, but what I'm saying is though you're doing a lot of good stuff, but the divide in many of our neighborhoods is increasing. So something's missing. You're doing a lot of good stuff. But what I've said to them is that you're helping a lot of the individuals that are coming out of these neighborhoods, but we're not changing the neighborhoods from which they come. So you're going to keep having to help these individuals coming out the neighborhoods because you're not changing the environment from which they're coming. And so the paradigm needs to change. And so instead of just doing your own thing, with Complete Communities, we've spent like 2 years in these 5 neighborhoods. And we've looked at some. There are some neighborhoods that are more advanced with their leadership structure. They've got that neighborhood leadership already there. They just need maybe a few more resources or an added push, and they can get there much quicker. There are some neighborhoods, the leadership structure is not there at all. So you literally have to get in there and help to build the leadership structure, because the goal is to establish sustainable communities such that when you do bring the resources, the projects, and all of these other things, and when you leave and go to the next 5 years from now when you look back, the communities have not fallen back to where they were. So you have to build sustainable communities, which you have to put that map rope, you have to design in such a way that the leadership and the structure is there that they can continue to advance. So they need quality parks, green space, mixed income housing, quality neighborhoods, quality grocery stores, jobs, economic opportunities, transportation options, good infrastructure. Well, it's a very ambitious plan by design. And so we've spent 2 years. We don't go in telling people what it is that's best for them, but we go in working with them to design projects or a plan that we can meet. And after 2 years in those 5 communities, we've done just that. Okay? And in October, we then will have our Complete Communities University. It's an all-day event in which we bring the leadership from all these communities together, what we call the Complete Communities University. And we bring in other outside agencies, and we kind of go over what's needed to go to the next level. The city can't fund the project to get us where we need to go, so we have to rely on outside partners, philanthropists, looking for all granting opportunities, financial institutions. And so I'll meet with many of the banks again. And then I'm going to meet with 3 key financial institutions. I won't call them out this morning, but 3 key banks. Because I've seen what they have done in Chicago. They've given like $20 million to Chicago. And they gave $20 million to Charlotte. And then another one gave like $150 million down in Detroit. But we're the 4th largest city. Okay? You can't complete communities without the resources that are needed to put in the projects and to complete the community engagement. You have to have the resources. And once that piece is solidified, then I think you're going to see transformation at its best. And you'll be able to see it in real time, and it'll move much quicker. And now we're in the process of identifying 5 other communities where we'll start back up in January, and we'll move out from that. But for me, that's what will get us much closer to where we need to be in this city, is that when you can look at a neighborhood, regardless geographically where it's located, and see a neighborhood of promise and hope, then I think you will see a change in what comes from these communities. And then you can build housing, or multifamily housing. And you're not just having to look at just one geographical area. And then the housing you build has to be an enhancer. It can't be the same sort of multifamily development. It's got to be different. In many ways, it's got to look different, okay? Because it has to be uplifting to the community and not a drag on the community. And we have to be innovative and more creative on how we build, and that's by design, and it's got to be intentional. And we have to know what it is that we are trying to seek. And for me, what's important is that it doesn't matter where you live in this city. regardless of where you live, when I look out and see the people that are in that community, I see hope and see promise. The last thing that I'll say, and I used it on the banks, I thought showing the banks, the executives, would be something more persuasive than anything that I could say. So we took areas of all of these complete communities, 5 of them. Acres Home, near North Side, 2nd Ward, the Gulfton area, 3rd Ward. And what I said to the bankers, I want you to find your financial institution in these complete communities. Because I can tell you where you used to be, but let me show you where you are or are not. And in almost all of these communities, they are either on the periphery or not at all. And what I said to them, like my bank, that I've been with since 1976, going through a couple of name changes, And I said about my bank, I'm the mayor of the 4th largest city in the United States, and I cannot find my bank in my community. The mayor has to go outside in order if I want to go to my bank. And quite frankly, I didn't find any of the others either. But let me tell you what I do find in my community. Check cashing companies, financial institutions where if you are poor on the low end, you're going to pay more. So the other financial institutions are not there. But the check cashing companies and all of these others, they become the financial institutions that are in these neighborhoods. And poor people either pay more or they don't have the services at all. And so when banks and others start leaving, others will leave as well. And then children will really be at risk. Because when you are rating and looking at these schools, and Bob, you're wondering why there's underperforming schools, when the resources leave, then how do they achieve? Quite frankly, they are swimming against the tide, the flow, the stream. Doesn't mean they're not as smart or as gifted. It means they're having to really swim a whole lot harder to get there. But doesn't mean they're not bright. Doesn't mean they're not talented. Doesn't mean they cannot exceed. But the kids are more at risk. And in large part, not because they have abandoned the principles that are important, but many of us have abandoned them. So there's no better time than now to design a community and a city that will work for them. And then lastly, if that wasn't enough, when the Harveys of the world comes, okay, and you have families and kids that are already on the margins, then that just presses them down even more. Now, the good news is that these are survivors. And kids are highly resilient, okay? And even their parents are resilient. And if we give them just a little bit of support, they can make it, okay? And I know that's the case because what I will say to you is that I am a kid from Acres Home. But every Sunday, when I was in college, and even before then, in high school, there was one of my members, Evelina Muldrew, a senior citizen. and Miss Marjorie, we called her Sister Marjorie. For whatever reason, she saw something in me. And she would find me before I left church, and she would hug me. And if you're a senior, senior citizens, they had their money, and she would have this $5 bill, and she folded it so tight. And she would always place a $5 bill in the palm of my hand. And she would say, "Little Sylvester, Sister Evelina doesn't have much, but boy, I'm pulling for you." Okay? Every Sunday. And it got to the point I would not leave church on a Sunday without finding Sister Evelina Moultrie. Because that $5, hey. But you know what it did for me? It said to me, she cared. And even though it was just $5, for me, I carried that all the way through. So when I got to college and things started, got a little rough, I remembered that $5. Miss Sister Evelina believed in me. Got to law school, times got a little rough. I had to stay in the game. Worked a little bit harder. Sister Evelina Moultrie. Okay? When kids get that type of support, and they know the difference between being genuine and being phony, they do know. Okay? They know whether the hug is real or whether the hug is phony. They know even when you're fussing at them. They have an innate ability of knowing when the fuss is because you care or when you're being phony. They know that. And so when we give them just that added support and that love, it motivates them to do even more. Well, I believe that's what Children at Risk is all about. And now we simply have to work by design to include others in the battle. And I know we can make a huge, huge difference. This is our moment. This is the season in our city. It's our opportunity to lead the way. We do have to be bold and bold in what we do. Sometimes things will get in our way that will keep us from doing certain things that we really want to do. Because I know that was something, Bob, that y'all really wanted to do. I would say to you, don't totally discard those plans, because Complete Communities is very ambitious. It is no small task. I would tell you, it is very, 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 very ambitious. But if you, as they say, in Texas and in Houston, if you don't go big, then go home. Okay? Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.